Greetings and salutations, loyal viewers of this channel. My name is Sean, and today we want to talk about all these different various ways that the city of Chicago is essentially limiting in the effort to ban protests against the Democratic National Convention set to be hosted there in the month of August, because I find this absolutely fascinating, because as we all know, you are allowed to dress up in all black, declare an independent nation, burn down businesses, destroy cars, attack the police, attack police headquarters, federal courthouses, all manner of things in the name of left-wing causes. But the moment you decide that you're going to go after the Democrats, the moment you decide that you're going to make them look bad at their convention, all of a sudden the most progressive, defund the police, pro-Black Lives Matter rioter politicians come out in force, and they not only use physical force, but they use every dirty, underhanded trick in the book in order to block you from being able to protest them. And that's what I want to talk about today. But before we do, thank you to everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money. Okay.
And by the way, double thank you. If you guys haven't noticed, I'm not doing ad reads anymore. That is because of the supporters on the website, on the Patreon, and on the Subscribe Star. Because of your support, I've decided to now drop my rep that was getting me those ads. So again, double thank you.
New at 6, what started as a simple request for records has turned into the silent treatment from City Hall in Chicago.
Yet 3 separate city agencies have so far refused to turn over records to NBC5 Investigates, detailing who's requested permits to protest during the Democratic National Convention.
So the way that this segment opens up is with the fact that all these different news agencies are getting refused open records requests, and it appears like it's coming from the top, it's coming from the mayor's office, because they have submitted these requests with multiple agencies and have yet to get any response of any kind. And as we know, based on our previous videos on this particular topic, Chicago is pulling out the stops to effectively ban protesting the Democratic National Convention.
The groups want to hold their demonstrations close to the United Center where the convention will be held, but have instead been told they are restricted to the stretch of Columbus Drive from Roosevelt to Jackson. That location is more than 3.5 miles away.
And those tactics include, but are not limited to, cordoning off the protesters into a small area miles away from the DNC where they won't even be able to be seen, which is now being challenged in court and likely is going to be overturned. In fact, I believe the city of Chicago specifically actually enacts this ordinance or has enacted these ordinances for previous Democratic National Conventions. They've been challenged and they've been overturned because obviously you can't restrict a protest to the point where it can't even be seen or heard by anyone who's interested in the thing that you're protesting. But of course, unabated Brandon Johnson, Mr. Ultra Progressive, Mr. Every attack on him is evil white racism, has decided that he's not even going to share with the media what they're doing behind the scenes because they are above the law. They're the Democrats.
This is a story we didn't think we'd have to tell you. We wanted to know which groups had sought permits to protest or march during the Democratic National Convention. We filed Freedom of Information Act requests with the city, but so far they've either been delayed, ignored, or flatly denied.
So right off the top, the local news says that they were aiming to produce a segment on which groups actually got approved and or denied their permits to protest the government. And I just want to say the idea that you should get permission from the authority that you're protesting in order to be able to protest is a very dubious notion in the first place. That being said, that information is supposed to be subject to open records requests, and call me crazy, but I think one of the reasons why they're trying to not give out this information is because they're probably enacting a bunch of stall and slowdown techniques against these different various groups in the hopes that they can deny them close to the convention and maybe, just maybe, have some justification to shut down the protests. And by the way, this is absolute madness when you think about it. Again, according to the city of Chicago, they're only permitting people to protest miles away from the actual DNC where nobody is able to see them in the first place. But even then, they're not issuing these permits. Not that you should need permits, but it just goes to show you that at least the leaders of these groups are trying to follow the law. On top of that, I think it's absolutely crucial that if you are going to be issued permits, we can look into you if something were to go wrong at your event so the proper people could be held accountable. By the way, this is something that, of course, they're trying to attempt, or they've been attempting, post January 6th, the darkest day in the history of democracy agency the world over. Where were you January 6th? I was in a car dealership trying to buy a car, and then the guy tried to tell me that frame damage wasn't serious damage, and then I looked up on the TV, and guess what? Democracy worldwide got frame damage. That's what happened. Where were you? Where were you?
After we requested copies of applications and the permits granted, the Chicago Park District asked for additional time. The Chicago Department of Transportation has so far ignored our requests. And the Chicago Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events denied our records requests.
So right there, you saw the three different agencies give three different responses. You had the first one that they requested information from, and they said, hey, look, we'll give it to you, but we need more time in order to do so. Now, this is a standard thing for certain Freedom of Information Act requests. The second institution that they ended up interacting with, they just did not answer them. They ghosted them completely, which again, according to open records requests, depending on what the law is called in your state, Freedom of Information Act requests nationwide, you're not supposed to do. You're supposed to respond in a timely manner, but they decided to ghost them. But the third agency really lends credence to my theory, which is the city of Chicago is not issuing any permits, or they're at least delaying as much as possible so that they could issue as few permits as possible, so that they could face as few legal challenges as possible.
The Chicago Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events denied our records requests, saying in an email that the permits have not yet been issued, and therefore any permit applications are considered preliminary or pending. The agency cited an exemption in the state's public records laws, stating that the documents can be withheld.
So they also throw in, on top of everything else, that they can't give them these applications because they're in this preliminary category, they haven't been issued, and state records laws actually exempt preliminary records from being released to the public. But it turns out that's actually not the case. We actually have an expert from the local news who will explain that exemption, and needless to say, the city of Chicago is lying.
That claim is absurd. The exemption they're relying on applies to their own deliberations about, for example, that application. It doesn't apply to the application itself. This is incredibly obvious under the statute and case law, and no properly trained FOIA officer should be asserting that exemption.
So I actually think it's really important to hone in on what this person is saying there, because it might be a bit confusing, so I want to make it 100% clear for everybody out there in my audience. When you submit a document, an application, or anything like that to the city of Chicago, even though they have not ruled up or down on said document, it is not actually technically under law considered a preliminary document. It's considered a completed document. Therefore, certain information from that document is subject to open records requests. And specifically, these permit applications should also be subject to those requests. And again, they're just looking for the names of the organizations that are applying for these permits. It should be a straightforward request, no problem at all whatsoever. The exemption that they're citing has to do with when the government's reviewing it, they might have some notes or conversations about whether or not they're going to approve it, and none of that is to made public as the decision process is going, and this is because they're deliberating and their preliminary notes could get out there in the public, and then public pressure could end up skewing the decisions of these officials, and they could actually not do their job. But after they make their decision, that side of the information is to be public. Again, it's about completion. The application is completed when it's submitted. Whether it's wrong or not, it's not preliminary, and their deliberations when they make a ruling are completed because it's submitted. So this is an absolutely absurd justification. But again, let us not forget that this agency in Chicago is making it 100% clear that they have not approved any of these permits. They're not doing it. They're slow walking it. This is a strategy, and you should pay attention to it.
I've seen all kinds of violations from the city and other public bodies around the state. This is one of the most ridiculous ones I have ever seen. I wish I could say that it shocks me, but public bodies, especially in the city of Chicago, have a pretty bad history.
Now, I'm actually going to link the whole video that I'm responding to in the description of this video so you can check it out for yourself. But the guy that they have talking as the expert is a person who represents all these different organizations, and essentially it's his job to sue the city of Chicago, to sue the state of Illinois, in order to get requests that were denied under open records law for frivolous reasons. And this guy believes that this assertion right here is one of the most ridiculous ones. And again, he does this for the NBC affiliate. He does this for private organizations and individuals. And this justification specifically, he believes is the most ridiculous. But of course, he's not surprised because it's Chicago. What do we expect from those institutions?
We do have some idea of who might protest and that it could include thousands of demonstrators. The only reason we know that, though, is because those groups have sued the city after their permit applications were denied.
Included in those court filings are copies of their permit applications and the denials from the city, which raised concerns that their requests to protests were duplicative and that their demonstrations would require too many additional officers to provide necessary security. Those groups have been in court as recently as this week, still waging their fight against the DNC's host city, hinting that thousands could show up in Chicago even without a permit.
Now, the local news affiliate says, hey, look, we do have some idea of some of the organizations that are going to come out and protest, and honestly, we should all have some idea that there's going to be a representation of the pro-Hamastinian side protesting. They've been absolutely everywhere. They've been going after Biden. In fact, Joe Biden was in Manhattan recently, lower Manhattan, for a fundraiser, and these people tried to confront him during that fundraiser. So obviously, they're going to be among one of the most militant groups that are going to be against Biden, one of the ones that's going to make him look really bad, and by the way, one of the ones that is actually drawing away the youthful vote from Joseph R. Biden. He is facing some serious consequences for this, but this is just another nail in the coffin of the Democratic Party and their argument that they're all about preserving democracy. They're obviously about special rules for themselves, and by the way, this is not just limited to the fact that they're handling their convention in this way, because protest zones miles away, denying permits, slow walking the release of records related to this, and all these dirty tricks are to be expected. But even more crucially, one of the things that I want to point out is that Brandon Johnson, the woke let's not fund the police for everything kind of mayor, made one of his campaign promises to get rid of what is called the ShotSpotter program. Now, we talked about this on the channel, made an entire video about it. You guys can check it out. It will be linked in the description along with the other video that I referenced. But the ShotSpotter program actually expired earlier this year, and it was up to him whether or not he was going to approve it up or down, and he made the decision to not approve it. However, he decided that he was going to extend it all the way until the end of August, aka all the way until the DNC. So if you're a resident in the city of Chicago and there's gunshots fired, you get wounded, somebody you know gets wounded, and for whatever reason nobody calls the police, the ShotSpotter system would deploy the police and it would deploy the ambulance. That's what leads to saving lives and potentially catching criminals, especially in a stop snitching environment. That's going to be gone. That's not for you. That's not enough for you. We have no interest in that if we're the city of Chicago, because we cater to the criminals. But, you know, there's going to be some important Democrats in town up in August, so they're extending that program that Brandon Johnson labeled evil white racist with all its evil white racism up until that point, because at that time, we actually want those important Democrats to get the care that they need. This is who they are. It is laid bare before us, and we're all witnessing it right now in the lead up to this DNC, and I'm very curious to see how it's all going to shake out. But of course, I want to know what you guys think, so let me know down in the comments below. If you liked the video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on the social medias, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about more dirty tricks to ban protests in the city of Chicago. Till next time.